I have to say about the way this tournament's gone so far is that the entirety of Canada is lamenting the absence of Tom Wilson. Good morning to you. Good Monday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into football and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. It'll be United States versus somebody in the Four Nations Face-Off final Thursday night in Boston. The final two round-robin games are today. That's Canada versus Finland. If either of those teams wins in regulation, they advance. The nightcap is a meaningless game for the United States against Sweden, but nothing that happens today can change what's been the story of the event. And that's that the Americans are really good, but also really big and really bad in a good way. Not everybody on that roster, mind you. Jake Gensel's been their most prolific scorer. Jake's obviously not in that category. Jacob Slavin's been unreal on the back end, and he's not in that category. Connor Hellebuck is maybe only now being appreciated as what he's been for a long time, and that's the best goaltender in the world. He doesn't fit in that category. But those Kachuk boys, they sure do. And there's a bunch of other players who fit with that size and snarl to go with their speed and their skill. And you got to trust me when I tell you that I'm not at all referring to the 3 fights in the first 9 seconds the other night. I'm just not. I mean, that was neat. That was entertaining. It was electric, I'm sure, for everyone in Montreal. But when I'm looking at the way these Americans have played against both Finland and Canada to date, they've been heavy on the forecheck. They've been heavy in defending the vertical middle of the ice. And in all the space in between, they've been heavy as well in forcing turnovers and sending the attack right back. And this is to the extreme that by the time the third period came around against Canada, when it was just a 1-goal lead, thanks to Dylan Larkin's 2-on-1 snipe in the second period, you started thinking to yourself, maybe it was just because Mike Sullivan was behind the bench, but that they can't just keep sitting on this lead. They're going to have to go and get some shots. They're going to have to go and score some goals. And you know what? By about halfway through the third period, you realized, no, they don't, actually. They have no need to spend any amount of time in the other zone with the way they're defending. And that really proved to be the case. Not that Hellebuck wasn't challenged a time or two, but for the most part, this was just about the way the American forwards tracked back, the way the American defense set itself, the way they kept things simple and selfless, and the way they were really, really smart. It was a clinic. It was an elite clinic on the highest stage of hockey. Because they weren't just defending, some other team there. They were defending like these generational stars coming at them in waves. It didn't affect them at all. Now, I'll repeat that the U.S. being big and bad isn't the only reason for that, but it helped. It made a difference. Little by little, even over the span of a single game, you could sense the Canadians feeling that effect of getting hit around a lot. Charlie McAvoy got burned early on the spectacular goal that Connor McDavid scored. McAvoy then sent McDavid into the next century. Brady Tkachuk did likewise to Drew Doughty. There's a long list of these. And you want to know something that I really went out of my way to pay attention to on the second viewing of this game? And yes, I did watch it twice. It was all the times that the American players finished a check. Remember that? Remember finishing a check? That's when some of you do go that far back. Finishing a check is something that's somehow, for some insane reason, been thrown out of hockey, not by the players, but by the coaches. They believe, and analytics will support to some extent, that if you go to hit somebody, then you are going to be out of position and not in an ideal situation to reclaim the puck. Now, the thinking for, only about a century or so was that if you go to finish a check, what you're doing relative to the puck really doesn't matter because you have eliminated one of the opponents who might also be going for that same puck. I couldn't count a single occasion, not one, where I saw an American player go out of their way to finish a check, and they did do that, where it would hurt the overall defending process. Now, let that be something that shines a really harsh light on the difference between the way these players naturally play the game and the way their head coach coaches it. Because this is not at all a Mike Sullivan style. Now, I'll give him credit for the way the team has performed. He has said all the right things. He's done all the right things. He's made a couple of nice moves, including in-game. As far as changing lines, most of your best coaching, as anyone will tell you, happens before a game, not during. But let's not pretend that Sullivan's turned over some kind of new leaf here. He and the management of this team, all of them, whether that's Billy Guerin, John Tortorella, who's also on the bench, and of course Sullivan himself, they crafted this roster. They crafted the roster in part because this is the way the talent breaks down anyway. But they also didn't exactly resist what they knew would be coming with it, which is good because what came with it looks like it should win this thing. When we come back, J1Q. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Today's J1Q comes from Killian, who says, "Hey DK, do you agree that while Connor McDavid might be the most talented player in the world right now with his crazy speed and stick handling, that Sidney Crosby is the most valuable player with his playmaking ability and strength on the puck? Even players who are not known for physicality like Rickard Rakell seem to be able to dump McDavid on the ice a lot. I don't see that happening to Sid. I think all the speed and the fancy moves in the world don't help if you can't stay on your feet." I've got a couple of ways to go at this one, okay? I don't see enough McDavid to be able to put together some sort of comparison point on how often he does or doesn't stay on his feet. When I've seen him, I've seen outrageous, beyond superhuman skating, and that's always going to include balance. That's always going to include an ability to recover from hits. And I'll also underscore here that some of the better, faster players in hockey history have known how to ride with hits as opposed to resisting them, which is why you might see them go down. It's not lacking skating or balance or certainly toughness. It's just, if my leg is going to collide with that guy's leg, I'm not going to miss the rest of the season. So when I see, and I have seen, some of the types of scenarios that you describe related to McDavid, that's what I see. I see someone who's pliable out there, in part because he's got to be pliable because he's the one flying up ice at 30 miles an hour or something. Do I think that McDavid is the most skilled, most talented, however it was that you worded it, or however it is that you choose to interpret it, player in the world? I find that it's hard to argue against that based, even if it's just on nothing other than how productive he is. And since the Oilers made it to Game 7 and overtime of the most recent Stanley Cup final, I think you can throw out a lot of those, yeah, but he's got to do it in the big one kind of criticisms. Now, are there different players in the league who can do different things better than him? Sure, one of them's on his own team. All due respect to what Alexander Ovechkin's doing in his late 30s, Leon Draisaitl is the premier goal scorer in this league. He's a better goal scorer than McDavid is. I'm not sure I'd ever want to see either of them risk their health in a one-on-one skating competition, but I would love to see on a big old lake somewhere McDavid versus Nathan MacKinnon. Or in a very different category, someone like Quinn Hughes, who wouldn't be able to match them stride for stride because he's not as big, but the nimbleness, his ability to glide left and right to look like he's actually levitating, yeah. And then to your point here, when you throw Sid into that, the thing that still pops to mind, and I hate to keep bringing up this cliche when I know everybody else has been doing it for a week, but we do this one all the time on this program, and that's to emphasize the whole serial winner thing. Sid's got more tools in his arsenal to win you a hockey game than anybody else in the league. And there are 100 different ways to go over that. The little stuff that he does, the detail, the minutia. Sid is the king of that stuff, in part because he's worked at it. He didn't roll out of the womb being able to win a faceoff on his forehand in the defensive zone, exactly where he wants it to go off the boards to clear the area. He practiced it relentlessly. So I know there's a lot of these kind of conversations that happen mostly in other sports, not as much hockey, of, who's the best, who's your dream this, dream that, and whatever. I don't feel this season's NHL, this current NHL, lends itself to just pointing to one guy and saying he's it. And that's the only reason I'm kind of hesitating at agreeing with you fully there on McDavid. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow. When, by the way, your actual Pittsburgh Penguins wearing Pittsburgh uniforms will be back to practice in Cranberry, and I'll be up there to cover that as well.